So, your GMAT is right around the corner. Maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's later this week, but either way, you're looking for some last-minute GMAT tips. Hi, I'm Brett Etheridge, founder of Dominate the GMAT, and I'd like to share with you 5 things you can and should be doing just before taking the GMAT to put yourself in the best position to get the highest score possible. So, let's dive in. Tip number 1. Tip number 1 is to know thy enemy. Know thy enemy. So maybe it's not the best thing to be thinking about the GMAT as your enemy, but here's the idea. You may recognize this phrase from Sun Tzu, or however you pronounce that, author of The Art of War, that I read way back in college, and you probably did too. And the idea is this, that the better you plan for battle, the better you know your opponent, the better you're able to outthink and kind of figure out what is in store for you once you hit that battlefield, the better chance you have of victory, the better chance you have of success. And the same goes on the GMAT, right? And there are 2 things about this that I would encourage you to do. Number 1 is to watch the video that is put out by the GMAC that gives you a behind-the-scenes look at what you're in store for on test day if you haven't watched that. Now, if you're watching this video on my website, on my blog, you can click on the link below to actually go directly to that video. If not, you might need to scout it out on YouTube or go to mba.com to find that video. But they literally show you what you're in store for, what the registration process is like, what the room is going to look like, what the little cubicle and the computer screen where you're going to be taking the GMAT is going to look like, you know, the lockers where you put your stuff. All of these little things may not seem like a big deal, but the fewer surprises there are on test day, the better. It's something very simple you can do, and why not be as prepared as possible? And the second thing is scout out your route. And this may seem a little bit weird, but I remember when my wife took her GMAT, I got a frantic call. Literally, I think it was like 45 minutes before she was scheduled to take the GMAT, and I was actually still in bed. And she called me up and she said, Brett, I am at the location where I thought the GMAT was supposed to be, and it is not here. Help. So I had to get online, and turns out she had the wrong directions, and she ended up frantically driving across town to get to the proper testing location minutes before her test was supposed to start. So imagine her state of mind, right? She was all frantic, and instead of being in a peaceful Zen state ready to take the GMAT, she was frantic because of something so simple. If she had scouted it out, maybe even take 15 minutes, 30 minutes and drive to the testing location, the day or 2 before the GMAT, just to get eyes on it. Again, know thy enemy. Certainly can't hurt, and it can absolutely help. With that, the second tip for you is to dress for success. What does that mean, to dress for success? Just what it sounds like. I want you to literally dress up to take the GMAT. Now you might be thinking to yourself, that sounds a little bit weird. I have seen countless studies that support this idea that the better you look, the better you feel about yourself, and the better you're likely to perform. I remember back in college, on all of my big final exam days, really for any test I took, I would wear a suit. Sometimes a full suit, but either way, definitely khakis, a nice button down, sometimes a tie. And it may sound a little bit weird. I know a lot of people roll out of bed the day of a test or the day of their GMAT, and maybe they even go to the testing center in sweatpants and a sweatshirt because you think, oh, I'm going to be comfortable. But here's the reality. The reality is that the better you feel, the better you look, the better you put yourself into a mental mind state that this is game time. This matters. This is important. I'm going to dress for the occasion. It literally shifts something in your brain to trigger a little bit more focus, a little bit more alertness. Again, it may sound weird, but I guarantee you that the better you dress, the better mindset you're going to have to do well on the GMAT. Which brings us to our third point, which is have the proper perspective. Chill out even, right? Have the proper perspective. Put the GMAT in its appropriate time and space. There's no sense in blowing it out of proportion. There's no sense in feeling like you just won't be able to succeed, or, oh my gosh, my whole life, my whole future depends on how I do tomorrow, because to the extent that you work yourself up that way, you're not going to perform to the best of your ability. You simply won't. You know, one of the things I like to do, in fact, you see this video here, you may have seen something like this. One of the things I really like to do is I like to put myself in just a state of remembering kind of where I fit in the larger picture, right? For me, I believe in God, and I like to remind myself that God's really in charge, that when we think about where we fit into the universe, man, we're a small piece of what's going on. And to the extent that I can step back and I can remind myself of the fact that life will go on, you know, even if I don't do as well on the GMAT as I would have liked to have, life will go on. And maybe it's because I served in the Peace Corps, and I've seen kids starving literally to death. You know, I spent 2 years living in a village where people made less than $1 a day. It is a privilege to take the GMAT. You are in the top 5%, maybe even the top 1%, even thinking about getting to go to business school. Just remember that, man. It is a privilege. You know, one of the things that I always do before making any major decision or embarking on any major event, like taking the GMAT, is I do this thing where I look at the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. And usually when I analyze the worst case scenario, I'm okay with it. And what that does is it kind of takes the pressure off. It kind of puts me at ease. And I'd encourage you maybe to do the same thing, right? Put the proper perspective on the GMAT. What's the worst thing that happens? Okay, maybe you don't do as well as that you wanted. What does that mean? Take it again. $250, right? It's not the end of the world. Reapply. Go to law school instead, right? I mean, it's so obviously they're not ideal scenarios. You've probably invested months preparing for the GMAT. You want to do well. Nobody likes to waste $250. I understand all this. But what I'm saying is the worst case scenario really isn't all that bad. And I think that even if it's just a mind game, even if it's just convincing yourself that I'll be okay with XYZ outcome, it puts your mind in a state, that positive expectancy. It takes the pressure off. Because if you go into the GMAT all jacked up and feeling like, man, I'm so stressed out, I have to do well on this thing, you're not going to do nearly as well. So put it in the proper perspective, chill out a little bit, and you're going to do well. Which actually brings me to the fourth point, which is actually really important, which is you've now put in the work. Trust your preparation. Trust your preparation. The reality is, like it or not, if the GMAT's tomorrow for you, or even if it's kind of towards the end of this week, there's not a whole lot more that you're going to be able to do. Hopefully you've put in the time. Hopefully you've taken the practice tests and you've taken my course, hopefully. But either way, you've put in the time, you're not going to do that much more. It's like an athlete. An athlete shows up to the track on test day. He's either put in the time or he hasn't. For you, there's only so much that you're going to be able to do at this point. Trust your preparation. And here's the other thing I would say about that, and this is crucial. A lot of students, maybe it's the day before your GMAT, and a lot of students will ask me, what should I do? You know, should I memorize more formulas? Should I take another practice test? Go watch a movie. I'm serious. Don't study the night before the GMAT. I'm dead serious. I've seen study after study. Your brain is a lot like an athlete's body. What's the most important day for an athlete? It's actually rest day. The day they're not doing anything. Why? Because it's the day their muscles get to regenerate and come back stronger. It's the day their body gets to kind of get back what's been broken down, and they actually are able to perform better as a result of that rest. Your brain actually works the exact same way. It needs time off for the synapses to make those connections to solidify that learning, right? I don't want to get into the neuroscience of it, but the reality is when you sleep, when you take time off and you go to sleep and your brain forms those connections, that's actually solidifying the memory that you're going to be able to draw from on test day. So I hate to say it, but staying up at night, looking at flashcards a few more times, or trying to work a few more practice problems, you know, sure, maybe do it a little bit if you want, but I would say at some point, maybe 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, the night before the GMAT, unplug, baby. Go watch a movie, watch the sitcom, go on a date with your wife, and you'll wake up the next day and don't even look at stuff the morning of, because the reality is your brain is actually going to be better prepared taking a little bit of rest, a little bit of time off, than if you cram the night before the GMAT. You've had months to prepare for the GMAT. One extra night of looking at a few flashcards isn't going to make that much difference, and in fact, trust your preparation. It's actually better for your brain to take that little bit of a break, so hopefully that's encouraging to you. Which brings me to the final point, and this might be a little kind of like dress for success, one of these kind of hokey ones, but I guarantee you it works. And the tip is this: be happy. That's right. Be happy. It may sound weird, but here's the reality. I was reading a book called The Happiness Advantage, and there was a line in the book that stuck out to me. It was citing a study where kids, I think in Japan, who did things to increase their happiness level, however they measure that, their happiness quotient, those students actually ended up doing better on standardized tests than their counterparts who weren't in quite as happy of a state. It sounds weird, but again, then I researched it and I looked at it and I read the study and I looked at other studies. Advances in positive psychology have come a long way. We know that our expectations dictate our reality. If you think you're going to do well on the GMAT, you're going to do well on the GMAT. If you go into it saying, oh, woe is me, I'm terrible at these type of questions, or every time I have a 50-50 guess, I get it wrong, or think about the mindset, the stories you tell yourself. And to the extent that those are negative, like every time I guess I get them wrong, or every time I see this type of question I get it wrong, or I'm just terrible at data sufficiency, or I hope the reading comprehension passages are easy, or they're topics that I know something about. All of those negative thoughts will fuel negative results. On the flip side, positive expectancy, that positive psychology, will actually fuel your success, and a component of that is happiness. Right? And so there's some simple things to do. I have a whole separate blog article on this, but the morning of your test, the morning of the GMAT, wake up early and go for a walk, take your dog for a walk, pet your dog a little bit. Maybe if you're going through Starbucks or something on the way to the GMAT, buy coffee for the person behind you, give to a charity of your choice. I mean, it sounds like these weird things, but anything that fuels your happiness level the day of the test, kind of like dressing for success, it puts you in a mindset for success. So don't believe me? Give it a try. What's the worst thing that happens? You do something nice for somebody, it makes their day, it makes your day, and even if it has zero impact on your GMAT, you've made the world a better place. But I guarantee you it'll actually help you on the GMAT. So there you have it. Some of them a little bit more orthodox, like trusting your prep maybe and knowing anatomy. Some of them a little bit more unorthodox, but they work. So with that, I wish you the best of luck. If it's tomorrow, if it's later this week, go out, trust your preparation, get yourself into the right mindset, and may you dominate the GMAT.